Hi, I'm Nancy Chanteau, and I'm going to read to you from Access to Power, a radical approach for changing your life. I'm going to read to you from the Depletion chapter, and this is called How to Recognize Depletion and Create a Life of Plenitude. This is something I wrote in the book. And then I'll talk a little bit more about depletion and repletion and what we can do to make our lives better. A couple came into my office for a conflict resolution session. They'd been struggling in their marriage and were hoping to work through some difficult issues that made them feel distant and unhappy. I started the session as usual, led them through a quiet meditation, and then asked one of them to start by checking in about how they were doing and to share their agenda items for the session. The wife burst into tears. I looked at both their faces and knew this would be a different session than we had planned. They were both depleted, and in their current state, any relationship conversation would likely produce more separation and disconnection. Depletion is a state of exhaustion caused by not enough or scarcity. There's not enough energy, money, resources, time, resilience, intellectual capacity, and so on. In Skills for Change coaching, we use a scale of -10 to +10 to identify states of depletion and replenishment. When she burst into tears, I knew the wife of the couple described above was at least a -5 and more likely at -7 or below on the depletion scale. The husband's face was gray and drawn, and his body slumped in a shape that looked like exhaustion and resignation to me. I guessed he was at least at a -3 and possibly lower. This section is called Identifying Depletion. I handed the wife a tissue and proceeded to explain that depletion usually happens to us when we have some sort of difficulty that is more challenging than usual, or if something has been hard for a long time and has gradually worn us down. The problem with depletion is that when someone is below 0 on the scale, normal tasks that usually take minimal effort become extra difficult. The first job of someone who is below 0 is to get above 0. When our depletion is simply energetic or physical, we will replenish through personal self-care. If she gets enough sleep, healthy food, her family's basic needs met, and if possible some exercise or pampering, a healthy person who is slightly depleted will bounce back up into positive repletion numbers. By the time we finished creating replenishment plans for the couple in my office, they both seemed calmer and more connected with each other. The next time they came in for a session, we made real progress on their relationship patterns, and they both credited their focus on replenishment in the intervening week as one of the main reasons they were able to be less defensive and more compassionate and creative. Repletion becomes more difficult to attain if the depletion is systemic. I call systemic depletion the hole in the bucket problem. It's as if the efforts we make to replenish are draining out the other end, just like sand out of a hole in the bottom of a bucket. No matter how much replenishment we put in the bucket, we end up with an empty bucket. Usually people are systemically depleted by undone tasks weighing them down, conflicts in their relationships, grief and loss, chronic or long-term disease, poverty, accident recovery, mental health challenges, oppression or social injustice, overwhelming paperwork, addiction, legal challenges, job difficulties, or historic trauma. When we are systemically depleted, I find that the most helpful intervention occurs when we make progress towards the resolution of the bigger issue. Self-care practices might help raise our depletion number enough so that we can finally finish paying our taxes or pick up the phone to have that challenging conversation with our boss. And sometimes that impossible task becomes doable when we ask a friend to help us get it done. So I wanted to talk about depletion particularly now because around the holidays and also in the winter when there's less sunshine and less daylight, people often have less energy. And we get sick, it's the flu season or the cold season, and everybody is running on empty, and then we're also trying to push to make holidays special or to celebrate or to have time with guests, family, friends, etc. So when we get depleted, oftentimes what happens is we end up in greater levels of conflict. And that conflict is happening primarily because we're trying to find a reason for the depletion that we can fix. we're looking for either something in ourselves or something in the other person that's at fault or to blame in order to try and shift it or change it so that we feel better. And while that is a nice idea, it sometimes will work because we're actually finally attending to the systemic problems in either a relationship or our lives. It also can be fixing something that's not broken because we're just depleted and we need to attend to the depletion before we actually make any decisions. So when people are depleted, usually that's what I try and do. I try and help them figure out where they are on the scale from -10 to 0, from 0 to +10. +10 being top of the world and -10 being suicidal or the worst energy, low energy feeling of despair that you ever feel. Find out where you are. And I would consider a -5 to be somewhere at that place where people are really emotional and on the verge of crying, being very weepy. And then below that, sometimes people can get to a place of numbness where they can't cry. So there's definitely markers that help us figure out when we're depleted. But what I try and do is help people figure out how to get 3 or 4 points up the scale. Some number of points that will help them, some number of improvement in their replenishment that will help them do the thing that is going to be most helpful. And sometimes I can plan all the way up to positive numbers, but sometimes that will be overwhelming. So we just make a plan for the near term. And then once that replenishment gets achieved, then we make another plan for the next near term. Sometimes when people get a little energy, they immediately give it away. So we also might need to make a plan for that if that's what's happening. People get a little replenished and then they give their energy away. They get a little replenished, they give their energy away. And we'll talk more about depletion and replenishment in future videos, but I just wanted to get this conversation started and help you see how paying attention to depletion and replenishment can be the most helpful thing that you can do to make a change at the beginning. Thanks. Hope this helps.